You know, I've talked about the gifts that black children have. Gifts second to none. We were given the best gifts in the world. We were the first people God ever even created.
Teacher. All right. Yes, sir.
We have minds that are second to none. Yet somehow we've been deceived into thinking that to use them is to be non-black. That means our consciousness has been created by someone else. Consciousness then is a power. It's a type of power. How much power consciousness has depends upon its level and its organizational state and its functional state. That's why other people who want to use other people seek to control their what? Their consciousness. Because one thing about consciousness, the state of consciousness you're in determines what you're capable of doing or not doing. If you're in one level of consciousness, you can do one thing. If you're in another level of consciousness, you can do another. One of the greatest problems we have to solve in trying to achieve our fullest development is knowing how to control our consciousness in such a way that we can bring to a task or a problem or something and a level of consciousness appropriate to it. You say, how to match level of consciousness, organization of consciousness with problem, with circumstance, you see, and how to be able to do that through our will. That's a very difficult task to achieve. In other words, then, when we know our body needs rest, it cannot get rest if we remain in a state of wakeful consciousness, can it? Not in the deepest sense. It cannot receive the restoration and rebuild itself as long as it's highly aroused. So what do? We put ourselves, or let ourselves do what? Go into the consciousness of what? Sleep. You see? And once we go into that consciousness, the body begins its healing process and reparative process, you see, and recreating process, and we awaken, energize, and heal, and with the clarity of consciousness that permits us to function. And you can't get that kind of healing and clarity of consciousness and restfulness and reparation unless you go into the consciousness of what? Sleep. But while you're asleep, you can't do what? Certain other things. So there are things you can do when you're awake and alert and in that state of consciousness that you can't do when you're asleep. And there are things you can do when you're asleep that you can't do when you're in another state of consciousness. And there are many levels of consciousness, you see. And if we could recognize them and know what behaviors are related to them, we will be able to regulate our behavior in a very appropriate way by regulating the levels of consciousness related and correlated with those behaviors. And therefore, you see, consciousness enables us to achieve certain ends. It makes it possible for us to accomplish certain things. And when you are able to achieve certain ends and accomplish certain things, that means you're exercising power. Because power involves the ability to achieve certain ends against resistance. The ability to act in terms of one's own interests. Depending on the state of consciousness you're in, you will relate not only to yourself in a various sort of way, but you will relate to others in different sorts of ways. If you're in a state of consciousness that you call anger, your relationship to that same person when you were in love changes, doesn't it? Your language changes, your body changes, everything changes when that state of consciousness is in possession. When you're feeling lovely and all of this, the language changes, the body changes, and other things happen. You see. Therefore, people who want to control other people seek to control their consciousness. Consciousness is to a good degree a social product. meaning that it is created as a result of the nature of the type of social interactions we have with other people to a good extent. And when you look then at the consciousness of black people in America and of African people in the world, the consciousness that we exhibit to a good degree at this point reflects the nature of the interaction we have with European people. And one of the major objectives of European people is to manipulate and control the consciousness of African people. And through their manipulation and control of the consciousness of African people, divert that power, which ordinarily would be the power of African consciousness, to their own use, and increase their prosperity and power thereby. The relationship then of the European man to the African man, to a good extent, is a relationship of Count Dracula to his victim.
Trying to integrate and merge with your enemies is not going to solve your problems. Trying to integrate and merge with your enemies is not going to solve our problems, and it is not going to happen. As a matter of fact, it is a fantasy that has kept us from taking care of business for far too long. The idea that we're going to one day be one with these people, that we're going to merge into invisibly with these white folks. Even if that were possible, we should question our motives for wanting to do so. Why would we want to merge with the world's greatest criminals and thieves, with the people who have the worst values who have the worst values the world has ever known? It's amazing to hear some of your parents saying to our children, we want to be just like them. It is a joke. Power and consciousness. We're going to pursue African-centered consciousness, personality, and culture as instruments of power. Ultimately, this is what the whole struggle is about, one of power, not one of loving one another and all the things we hear. Largely, the problems we are confronted with today as African people in America flow from our powerlessness or our inappropriate use of power. We've been made to think that to even talk about and think about of power is sinful, that to pursue it is immoral and wrong. But one cannot exist without power. Without power, there's no life. A battery without power is dead. You need power to act, to behave in the world, to deal with the world. Consequently, we must interpret what we are about in terms of power. We have the power. Brothers and sisters, we have the possibilities. We just need to reorganize ourselves, reorganize our consciousness, our personality, and our culture, and see them as instruments of power and use them as instruments of power to transform our situation.